Welcome to the Delmarva Almanac. Each week we connect you to the best of Delmarva. Like other almanacs, our aim is to tell you a little bit about our past, our present, and events in the near future. I'm your host, Dana Kester McCabe. So what's in a name? Most of the history books simply say that Caroline County was named in honor of the wife of the last colonial governor of Maryland. However, there is a much more complicated family drama behind the name, worthy of any soap opera. Our story begins with the last Lord Baltimore, Frederick Calvert, who died in 1771 in Naples, Italy, at the ripe old age of 40. He had a terrible reputation for being a womanizer and generally living a dissolute life that led to his early demise. He left the bulk of his estate, including the colony of Maryland, to his illegitimate son in Ireland, Henry Harford. Henry's little sister Frances and their aunts, Frederick's sisters, Louisa Browning and Caroline Eden, also all received an annual allowance and the right to inherit should Henry perish before them. Caroline's husband was Robert Eden, the governor of Maryland. His job was to represent Lord Frederick, who was not terribly engaged in the day-to-day running of his province. Caroline and Robert were relatively well liked by the people in Maryland. He owned racehorses, and they had a fine plantation overlooking the Chesapeake Bay, where they liked to entertain. He had relaxed the laws about traveling theater troupes, which were considered bad influences. When Lord Frederick's will became known, Sister Louisa's husband fought the will in court, saying that his wife was the only legitimate heir in the line of succession, being the oldest sibling left. Robert Eden had been named one of the executors of Frederick's will, along with two other gentlemen, Peter Provost and Robert Morris. The Edens and the executors took the side of the illegitimate Irish nephew, who was still under the age of 10. In order to further solidify his wife's claim, Robert decided to create two new counties, one named Caroline for his wife, and the other named Harford for their nephew Henry. This all coincided conveniently with a petition from some inhabitants of Queen Anne's and Dorchester's County who wanted to erect a new county for their, quote, ease and convenience, unquote. So Caroline County was created by an act of the Maryland legislature in 1773. Its county seat was named Edentown for the governor. The accent of the people there eventually led to the name being shortened to Denton, which is what it is still called today. You're listening to the Delmarva Almanac. I'm Dana Kester McCabe, and this is the tangled story of how Caroline County got its name. For all their legal maneuvering, the Edens did not hold on to the reins of power in Maryland for long. Though young Henry Harford was made Lord Proprietor of the colony in absentia, with Robert Eden remaining as governor, shortly thereafter, on July 2, 1773, the lower house of the legislature repealed several of his tax measures, calling them arbitrary, unconstitutional, and oppressive. The proverbial writing was on the wall. Caroline and Robert's children wisely returned to England before revolutionary hostilities broke out. 3 years later, in 1776, Robert Eden followed, escaping by catching a ride on the sailing vessel the HMS Bowie, which was waiting for him in the Chesapeake Bay. Meanwhile, Sister Louisa Browning and her husband continued to appeal their case in London. As luck would have it, by the time it came before the court, America had declared her independence. The judge said he could not rule on the case since he would not be able to enforce the property rights of estates no longer under the control of the British Crown. Basically, he said that they would have to come back at the conclusion of the war, which they all did. King George III made Eden the first Baron of Maryland in October 1776. Presumably, this was an act of confidence in their ability to win back the wayward colonies. Eden and his wife were awarded a substantial settlement and a pension for his service as Maryland's governor. On a strange little side note, the other executors of Frederick, Lord Baltimore's estate, that's Peter Provost and Robert Morris, made sure that the rest of the money Lord Calvert left behind did not go to waste. They respectively married Lord Frederick's mistress, Henry's mother, and his little sister, Frederick's other illegitimate child, who was only 13 at the time. Henry and Robert returned to Maryland shortly after winning their case, but the new American government refused to honor their claims to the property they owned before the war. Apparently the lands had been put up as collateral for state bonds. As late as 1899, Henry's descendants were still trying to lay claim to property along the Potomac River. Not all of the family descendants were infected with an unrelenting propensity for greed. Though named for his reprobate uncle, Frederick Eden, the son of Robert and Caroline Eden, was an acclaimed scholar who wrote groundbreaking progressive studies on the fair treatment of the poor. Here on Delmarva, all that remains of this soap opera is the name of Caroline County. And that is probably a good thing. Caroline County is a really beautiful place to live or visit, and it bears no scars from the tangled origins of its name. No wonder people simply like to say that it was named for the wife of the last colonial governor of Maryland. Well, that's all for this edition of the Delmarva Almanac. We'd like to thank our community partners, the Friends of Delmarva Public Radio, the Community Foundation of the Eastern Shore, and underwriters EatDrinkBuyArt.com for their help in bringing this program to you, our audience. Our theme music was provided by Brightside Studio. This show has been a Moonshell production. Thanks for listening. Until we meet again, may the rhythms and tides of Delmarva bring you good fortune.